Now, we're also here to discuss another example of bad federal policy and how Alberta's government is standing up to defend the interests of Albertans. For many years, federal Liberal governments have been unnecessarily harassing law-abiding firearms owners rather than focusing on the criminals who actually abuse firearms in dangerous ways. In fact, the Trudeau government lifted the mandatory minimum prison sentences instituted by the Stephen Harper government for the criminal abuse of firearms. So they've lightened criminal penalties for criminals abusing firearms while continuing to use regulatory power to harass peaceful, law-abiding citizens who safely own firearms as part of their lives. We've seen the Liberals continue to, as I say, penalize law-abiding firearm owners, target shooters, and hunters with useless virtue signaling legislation that won't stop violent crime and will simply make criminals out of good citizens. As a result of their latest firearms ban, a host of legal license applications and transfers are now sitting in federal limbo. Just like they can't process passports on time, apparently they can't get that done for firearms licenses. Some people are waiting for over 6 months for these licenses and these transfers to be approved by the federal bureaucracy, but Alberta will no longer wait for Ottawa to fix the mess that they have caused. So today, I'm happy to announce that Alberta's government is significantly increasing our support to Alberta's Chief Firearms Officer so those transfers can happen right here in Alberta. We created the Office of the Chief Firearms Officer. As I said, it's something that provinces have been legally entitled to do since the mid-1990s, but our government was the first in Alberta to decide to actually appoint Alberta's own Chief Firearms Officer to ensure a common-sense application of the law. And that's exactly what Terry Bryant, Alberta's first Chief Firearms Officer, is doing. Alberta's government will never hesitate to take action when our province or our economy or our constitutional jurisdiction is threatened by Ottawa. And today's announcement underscores that. With that, I'll invite Minister Shandro to provide remarks, and he'll be followed by Chief Firearms Officer Bryant.
As Premier said, this began a little more than a year ago when Alberta set up its very own Provincial Firearms Office. Today, I'm proud to announce that we are now greatly expanding the Alberta Chief Firearms Office by providing an in-year funding increase of $700,000, growing to $7 million next year, with $5.2 million in earmarked funding annually thereafter. And this is funding that will allow us to create 40 new positions, greatly expanding the Chief Firearms Officer's ability to process license applications, transfers, authorizations to carry, and other tasks much faster, and to do it right here in Alberta. There are over 340,000 licensed, law-abiding firearms owners in Alberta, making our province home to the third largest and fastest growing rate of firearms ownership in the country. Many of these firearms owners have had to deal with the Canadian Firearms Program, which is a federal program administered by the RCMP in Miramichi in New Brunswick. And this program is poorly managed, it's understaffed, and let's be honest, it's subject to the political whims of Ottawa. To make matters worse, recent federal legislation has effectively banned handguns, leading to an unprecedented increase in sales and transfers of more than 178,000 handguns since this spring. The Canadian Firearms Program has effectively shrugged their shoulders, leaving wait times to skyrocket. Thankfully, there is something that we can do about it here in Alberta. By creating the Alberta Chief Firearms Office, we have been able to step in to fill the void with the ACFO staff processing sales and transfers as fast as they can. Unfortunately, despite CFO O'Brien's best efforts, we have been unable to keep up with demand. Funding provided today will patriate administrative work that Alberta is able to legally take over under the Firearms Act, enabling this work to fall under the direct authority, under the supervision, and under the management of the Alberta Chief Firearms Officer. Jobs that have otherwise been filled by RCMP staff in Miramichi and New Brunswick will be given to Albertans who will provide services to Albertans. These extra staff will allow Alberta's government to provide faster, to provide more efficient services, and will better position our government to protect firearms owners' property rights, expanding Alberta's autonomy in the Confederation. And I want to thank CFO Bryant for her tireless work over the past year. CFO Bryant has traveled the province, meeting with over 40 different groups throughout the province and attending countless gun shows to speak to thousands of firearms owners. And I think she's made the joke to me that if there's a gun show in this province that she's not at, it's because there's another gun show at the same time that she's had somewhere else in this province. Without CFO Bryant's hard work and relentless advocacy, we would not be able to make the announcement that we're making today. So thank you very much, and I'll now turn over the podium to CFO Bryant to provide some remarks. Terry.
It's an incredible honor to hold the distinction of Alberta's first provincially appointed Chief Firearms Officer under the Firearms Act. I'm very proud of all that my dedicated staff and I have accomplished since we opened our doors on September 1st last year. Since then, Alberta's Chief Firearms Office has provided crucial public safety supports to local police services and the province's justice system, reviewing applications and conducting background checks to ensure those using and buying firearms do not represent a risk to the public is critical in supporting safe communities throughout Alberta. As the Minister mentioned, we faced a significant backlog of cases from the start. We took extraordinary steps throughout our first year to work through the backlog to address these unprecedented circumstances. We consistently pressed the Federal Service Centre to meet Albertans' needs. A chronic challenge to recruit and retain Federal Processing Centre resources in Miramichi has seriously affected the firearms program in Alberta. In addition to these challenges, our workload has been compounded by federal decisions. This includes the looming federal buyback or confiscation program and the national handgun freeze, which continues to clash with Alberta's firearms culture and provides little in terms of public safety benefit. Today's announcement will support us in adequately staffing our office with a focus on hiring local to better serve Albertans. It will significantly enhance our level of service to align with the expectations of Albertans in keeping our communities safe. And it will support our work, which helps sustain economic activity associated with lawful firearms ownership in Alberta through inspections and approvals of shooting ranges, as well as supporting firearms businesses. I will continue to engage with Albertans and connect with stakeholder groups in Alberta's firearms community and beyond. And my office will continue to advocate for common sense federal legislation in support of law-abiding firearms owners such as farmers, ranchers, hunters, target shooters, businesses, and collectors. Heading into our second year, bolstered by today's announcement, Alberta's Chief Firearms Office will further strengthen public safety and ensure those in need of firearms services get the assistance they deserve. Thank you.